For more than a century, no woman standing in her position has held this kind of power. Not Princess Diana, not Princess Anne, not anyone who has worn the title Princess of Wales since the early 20th century. And yet, this year, quietly, without a single tabloid leak or scandal, King Charles handed his daughter-in-law something the royal family almost never gives away: real formal authority. Not a ceremonial title, not a symbolic gesture for the cameras, an actual function of the crown itself. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what it means to be trusted with the power to speak, officially, for the House of Windsor, because that's exactly what just happened. Let's start with where things stand right now. Beginning this spring, Catherine, Princess of Wales, along with her husband, Prince William, formally stepped into a role known as Grantor of Royal Warrants. It sounds bureaucratic. It is anything but. A royal warrant is one of the oldest instruments of royal endorsement in British history. A formal seal that tells the world a company has served the royal household with distinction, loyalty and quality, often for years, sometimes for generations. When a business receives one, they gain the right to place the royal coat of arms directly onto their packaging, their vehicles, their storefronts, their letterhead. It is, in the truest sense, the monarchy's stamp of approval, and only a handful of people in the entire family are ever trusted to give it. Until this year, that circle was smaller than most people realized. Since Charles became king in 2022, only he and Queen Camilla had the authority to grant warrants. Not Prince Harry, not Princess Anne, despite her decades of service. Not even William until now. The decision to expand that circle was entirely the king's to make, because under British constitutional tradition, only the reigning monarch decides who is allowed to become a grantor. So when the palace confirmed that William and Kate would join that exclusive list starting this spring, royal watchers immediately understood what it signaled. This wasn't paperwork. This was Charles making a statement about trust, succession, and the future of the institution itself. But here's where the story becomes something bigger than a royal formality. Because what Kate is stepping into isn't just new. It's historic in a way that hasn't happened in over a century. The last woman to hold the title Princess of Wales and personally grant a royal warrant was Mary of Teck, back in 1910. Before she became Queen Mary, grandmother to Elizabeth II, she briefly held the title of Princess of Wales during the reign of her father-in-law, Edward VII. And during that narrow window, she was permitted to issue warrants in her own name. Once she became queen, that specific title and its warrant-granting privilege passed into memory. For the next 116 years, every subsequent Princess of Wales, including Princess Diana, one of the most globally influential women in modern royal history, never received this authority. Diana captivated the world. She reshaped how the public saw the monarchy. And still, the power to grant a royal warrant in her own name was never extended to her. To answer that, we have to go back further, to understand exactly what a royal warrant actually does, and why it carries so much weight inside British business and culture. The tradition stretches back centuries, formalized as a way for the crown to publicly recognize the tradespeople, craftsmen, and companies who supplied the royal household consistently and reliably. Over time, it evolved into something far more powerful than a supplier's badge. It became a mark of trust that consumers themselves came to recognize and respect. A warrant doesn't just say a company is good enough for the palace. It says the palace has watched that company for years. Sometimes company officials say the requirement is service for at least 5 of the past 7 years, and found it worthy of the crown's public endorsement. Right now, there are more than 800 active royal warrants held by companies ranging from massive international brands to small family-run workshops. Every single one is reviewed before renewal by the Royal Household Warrants Committee, and it is not uncommon for a warrant to quietly disappear if a company no longer meets the standard. In other words, this isn't an honor handed out for show. It is actively managed, actively protected, and treated as one of the monarchy's most valuable forms of soft power. And that brings us to the real significance of what Charles just did. By making Kate a grantor, the king didn't just give his daughter-in-law a new duty. He gave her one of the monarchy's sharpest tools of influence, the ability to shape which British companies get to say, publicly and permanently, that they serve the crown. Consider what that means in practical terms. For 15 years, Kate Middleton has been arguably the single most powerful influence on British fashion sales in the country's modern history. Journalists and industry insiders coined a term for it years ago, the Kate effect, describing the astonishing phenomenon where an item she wears in public can sell out within minutes. It started back in 2010, before she had even married William, when a blue wrap dress she wore during her engagement announcement disappeared from shelves almost overnight. Since then, the pattern has repeated itself again and again, across handbags, jewelry, coats, and shoes, generating what analysts estimate to be billions of pounds in economic impact for the British fashion and retail industry over the years. Now imagine that same influence, but formalized. Instead of simply wearing a brand and driving sales through public admiration, Kate can now officially anoint a company with the royal warrant itself, permanently linking her name and the crown's name to that business. In writing, with the legal right to display the royal arms. That's not soft influence anymore. That's institutional power, so who might receive it? While the palace has not confirmed specific recipients, royal commentators and fashion industry insiders have spent months speculating about which brands are best positioned. Alexander McQueen, the label that designed Kate's wedding gown and later her Coronation Day outfit, is widely viewed as an almost certain candidate. Catherine Walker, a house that has dressed her for formal royal engagements for years, is another name repeatedly mentioned. Jewelry brands like Kiki McDonough and Monica Vinader, both longtime favorites in her personal style, have also come up in discussions about who might be first in line. But here's an important detail that separates this process from simple celebrity endorsement, and it's one worth pausing on. Royal warrants aren't handed out because a brand was worn once at a gala. They are supposed to reflect a genuine, ongoing supplier relationship, meaning the businesses under real consideration are far more likely to be the quiet, consistent names behind the scenes: tailors, milliners, saddlers, printers, and household suppliers who have served the family faithfully, year after year, largely out of public view. That distinction matters, because it tells you something about how seriously the palace is treating this expansion of Kate's role. This isn't a marketing exercise. It's meant to function exactly the way it has for centuries, as recognition earned through service, not publicity. Now let's talk about how this news landed, both inside royal circles and out in the public. Reaction from royal commentators has largely framed this as one of the clearest signals yet of where the monarchy is heading. Several royal watchers and journalists have pointed out that this move places Kate and William unmistakably at the center of the institution's future, not simply as photogenic figureheads, but as working royals with genuine constitutional functions. One royal editor described the royal warrant as the gold standard of British endorsement, and predicted that Kate's warrant, once granted, would be especially sought after given her reach and reputation. There's also something quietly symbolic in the timing. This appointment comes at a moment when Kate has been rebuilding her public presence following a deeply difficult period. In early 2024, she stepped back from public duties after revealing a cancer diagnosis, a moment that drew an outpouring of concern and support from around the world. Her return to public life since then has been gradual and carefully managed, with the princess herself acknowledging that she is still finding what she has called the right balance when it comes to her workload. Against that backdrop, being entrusted with a substantive new royal function isn't just a professional milestone, it's a signal of confidence, both in her health and in her role within the family's long-term structure. It's worth remembering, too, that this appointment didn't happen in isolation. It came the same year Charles and Camilla themselves issued hundreds of new warrants under the new reign, including more than 140 to companies that had previously held warrants under Charles when he was still Prince of Wales, followed by several hundred more before the end of the year. In other words, the king has been actively reshaping this entire system since taking the throne, reviewing who holds warrants, renewing relationships he considers valuable, and now expanding the circle of people allowed to grant them at all. So why does any of this actually matter? Beyond the world of royal fashion and tradition? Because at its core, this is a story about succession, not in the dramatic, crisis-driven sense the tabloids often imply, but in the slow, deliberate way the monarchy actually works. Every formal power handed to William, and Kate right now is a rehearsal for the day they become king and queen. The royal warrant system is one of the ways the institution maintains its relationship with British industry, commerce, and public life. By stepping into this role now, while Charles is still on the throne, Kate isn't just receiving an honor. She's being trained, in the most literal sense, for the responsibilities that will eventually be hers permanently. And there's a broader economic story tucked inside all of this, too. British manufacturers, designers, and small businesses take the royal warrant seriously because it genuinely changes their fortunes. For a country whose luxury and heritage brands compete on a global stage, having the crown's public backing is a form of marketing money simply cannot buy. Expanding the number of people who can grant that recognition means expanding the ways British business can be publicly championed by the family that, for better or worse, still represents Britain to much of the world. Looking ahead, the coming months will be closely watched. The first applications from companies without existing warrants were due by the end of last summer, with formal grants expected to begin rolling out this spring. Royal commentators, fashion journalists, and business analysts alike will be watching closely to see which names Kate chooses to elevate first, because those choices will say something about her priorities, her taste, and the kind of monarchy she intends to help build in the years ahead. There is also a longer-term question hovering over all of this. As William and Kate take on more of these substantive royal functions, the public will inevitably begin measuring them not just as parents, style icons, or dutiful stand-ins for an aging institution, but as the two people who will one day sit at its very center. Every warrant Kate signs from here forward will be a small, cumulative answer to the question so many have asked for years. What kind of queen will she be? In the end, this isn't a story about jewels or crowns or dramatic midnight decrees. It's a quieter kind of history, the kind that rarely makes headlines in the moment, but that historians will look back on as one of the clearest signs of how deliberately and how carefully King Charles has been preparing the next generation to carry the crown forward. 116 years after Mary of Teck last held this power as Princess of Wales, Catherine holds it again. And in doing so, she takes one more step toward becoming not just the most photographed woman in Britain, but one of its most consequential.